Well, hello, boys and girls. I'm at home and you're in the classroom, but I got a reminder for you. Whatever I have for the sub to give y'all for work, and it's got due dates on it, worksheets, etc., stuff submitted by email. Just because I've been a little sick doesn't mean I don't quit working. I will grade or not grade whatever you hand in, and then I will record the same in the grade book. So you better act as if I'm there, and if you feel like that you can get by with not doing an assignment just because I'm not there, I think you've got a rude awakening. So I have not checked anything yet. This is just a word of warning from my old curmudgeonly self that I expect you to do the same work that I do, whether I'm there or not. So hopefully you've got it done. And I've said all that, and it means nothing. But if you haven't got it done, well, heaven help you. Because when I get back, the grades will be in the grade book, and you will reap what you have sown. Well, here's a story about Ruth from the book of Ruth. I'm going to shut off my ugly face and do a little narration. So I hope you pay attention and take some notes because, yeah, you'll get tested on it, just like always. Sorry about that. Well, no, I'm really not. You're here to get an education. So here we go. The book of Ruth. Well, it's supposedly written during the time of the judges, which we just finished. It doesn't say which judge. It's just a story that's in the background. There's two themes to it. First of all, God's mercy to two widows, that is, their husbands have died. And in ancient Israel, as in many ancient countries, widows needed people around them to help them because they didn't have anybody to provide for them. It's also a story of redemption of how Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi are redeemed. That is, their life finds goodness in the midst of something very, very terrible. The key verse is a very famous one, something that you may have heard, you may have not. It goes like this: Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. And this is what Ruth tells Naomi. And we'll see here in a moment when she says that. Three main characters. Naomi is the mother-in-law. Her name means pleasant, but because her husband and her two sons die, she says, call me Mara, which means bitter. She's a bitter woman. Life has been cruel. The main character is Ruth. Her name means friendship, and she's from Moab. Now, if you remember from her stories, the people from Moab were considered to be despicable. If you remember, they were the descendants of the daughter who had sex with her father. If you remember the story from the book of Genesis, Lot and his daughters. So anyway, Ruth, one of these Moabite people, she decides to go with Naomi and go back to Bethlehem. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And she also is listed as an ancestor of Jesus. Boaz is the other main character. His name means in him is strength. He's a farmer, and he plays a pivotal role in this story. Older relative of Naomi. He's considered to be a man of much righteousness, a man of good morals, and we'll see how he is generous to both these women. And of course, he is the ancestor of Jesus, and later in the story, he will marry Ruth. So Ruth's faith. Naomi loses her husbands and sons while they're living in Moab. The reason that Naomi and her family is living in Moab is there had been a famine, and they had moved from Bethlehem in ancient Israel to Moab just to survive. Well, when she loses her husband and her sons, she decides to move back to Bethlehem. She has two daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth. She tells them to stay there. Well, Orpah agrees to stay in Moab, but Ruth says, nope, I'm going to go with you. And that's where she says that famous passage, I will go with you and always be with you and die with you, etc., etc. And so Ruth clings to Naomi, and Naomi finally relents and says, yeah, you can go with me. And there you see that passage again. So Naomi returns to Bethlehem with Ruth. Now remember, Ruth is an outsider. She's from Moab. She is young, and so she could probably be taken advantage of and abused because who's really going to care? She's a Moabite. She is an illegal immigrant, if you would put it in today's terms, and no one's really going to care about her. Well, Ruth begins to glean food for her and Naomi. Gleaning means you go and pick up food that's left over after the harvesters have come through. It's a hard way to get your meal. You pick up the leftovers, and there's not going to be a lot, and that's what you're going to eat for the day. And so she's a hard worker. Well, Boaz recognizes that Ruth is a hard worker, and she praises her for her selflessness and for taking care of Naomi and leaving her own homeland to do that. And so Boaz gives instructions to his workers to leave her alone and also to leave her a little extra food. So Boaz is generous in his protection of Ruth and also in making sure that she's provided for. And because of this, Naomi begins to feel better about life in itself. Here's a picture of some women gleaning. Some modern day analogies to gleaning would be people who look in dumpsters for food, or people who go around the bakeries and get day-old bread, or go to grocery stores and get dented food or food otherwise that would not be deemed suitable for sale. There are people who glean in fields today around the world. Another way of gleaning would be where we have these organizations that take leftover food, like vegetables that are somehow irregular. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just not suitable for many Americans' expectations. And people can pick up that food rather cheap. Sometimes they can pick it up for free. So gleaning still happens today. Well, Naomi recognizes that Ruth is really their only chance of survival, and Ruth has been a hard worker. So she advises Ruth what to do. She says, I want to provide for you. And so she says, the farmers are going to have a harvest festival. They're going to eat, they're going to drink, and they're going to be merry. And so after they've drunk a little bit, they're going to stagger off and go to sleep. And so Naomi tells Ruth to put on her best dress, to put on some perfume, and to find out where Boaz is lying down for tonight, and then go and sneak in and pull the covers off his feet, lay down at his feet, see what happens. And so Ruth does. Well, Boaz wakes up, finds this nice-looking young lady at his feet, and he advises her on what to do, and you can read the story tonight for homework. But he says, listen, there's someone who's closer kin than I am, and they have to make sure whether they want to marry you or not before I can, because they're a closer relative to Naomi. It's a very interesting tradition in our modern world. We can't think of anything that would be close to that. But it goes back to the covenant of how do you keep a people's name, a covenant people's name in the land. How will Naomi and her husband and her dead sons, how will their name be remembered? How will their lineage continue in the ancient land of Israel? So Boaz says, I'll marry you if the closer kinsperson won't. And this is called the kinsman redeemer, and you can find a reference to it in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. So when a man died without children, his widow married his brother or the closest person that was kin to them to carry on the family line, to give them children and also to protect their land. It's all tied into the covenant. Also provides for a widow who may not have any other means of support. Well, the closer kinsman refuses to marry Ruth, and Boaz says, well, I will. I'm not afraid of losing anything. This other guy had already had children, and so he didn't want to mess up their inheritance. So Boaz marries Ruth, and the elders pray that Ruth will have children again so that the covenant will be extended. And so they do have a child named Obed, and Ruth metaphorically gives Obed to Naomi as a way of saying the lineage of your husband and your sons will continue. And so life is no longer bitter for Naomi, and Obed is also the grandfather of King David and the ancestor of Jesus. On a side note, the story of Ruth again gives us insight into how long and complex the story is of the ancient Israelites moving into the land of Canaan. And even though there are passages that warn them not to marry into the local people, the reality is that they did. And the book of Ruth seems to be kept in the Old Testament as a way of saying, listen, it's okay to marry these people. They can be godly people too. And so I think it's a sort of a protest book against those passages that told the people not to marry the locals and to treat them poorly. In fact, Ruth is the example of an outsider who is highly praised because she has so many good qualities.